Welcome to today's Explainer. You know that crushing, suffocating weight of modern anxiety? That relentless little voice in your head demanding that you absolutely must be flawless in your career, your relationships, literally everything you do. Well, if you feel that, you are definitely not alone. We are living through an actual epidemic of perfectionism right now, and it is taking a massive psychological toll on us. But today, we aren't just going to sit around and admire the problem. We're going on a bit of a journey. We'll start by looking at some deeply validating clinical psychology data on just how intense this pressure has become. And then, we're going to execute a powerful paradigm shift by looking at how rocket scientists handle failure. Yes, you heard me right. We are turning to aerospace engineering to fix our inner critics.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap. We'll cover the perfectionism plague. Look at what's driving it. Cross over into the aerospace world to explore the psychology of failure. Uncover the hindsight bias trap. And finally, wrap up by building a just culture.
All right, section 1, the perfectionism plague. We often talk about burnout and stress as if they're just isolated individual problems, like it's just a you problem. But groundbreaking research by psychologists Thomas Curran and Andrew Hill reveals that our obsession with being flawless is actually a massive, systemic, generational shift. Let me give you a sense of the scale here. 82,939. This wasn't just some quick online poll. Kern and Hill conducted a cross-temporal meta-analysis covering nearly 83,000 American, Canadian, and British college students over a 35-year period. We are talking undeniable, rock-solid data. And what they found is that today's young adults are substantially more prone to perfectionism than literally any prior generation on record. To truly wrap our heads around this, we need to break perfectionism down into its 3 core types. First up, there's self-oriented perfectionism. That's when you impose an irrational desire to be perfect on yourself. Then there's other-oriented perfectionism, which is placing completely unrealistic standards of perfection onto the people around you. I think we've all had a boss like that, right? And finally, socially prescribed perfectionism. This is that intense, heavy perception that everyone else has excessive, impossible expectations of you. Take a quick second. Which of these buckets do you feel like you fall into? The 35-year growth across all 3 categories is pretty staggering, but one of them stands out completely. Self-oriented perfectionism increased by 10%. Other-oriented went up by 16%, but socially prescribed perfectionism, that spiked by a whopping 33%. The researchers actually noted a remarkable acceleration in this specific type starting right around the early 2000s. And this is a huge red flag, because feeling like the world expects you to be flawless is directly linked to the record high levels of depression, anxiety, and burnout we're seeing today. Which naturally brings us to section 2. Why do you feel this way? We don't just wake up one day and decide to hold ourselves to completely impossible standards. We are reacting to our environment. The researchers outlined several really severe systemic drivers for this. First off, the intense rise in meritocracy places a constant, heavy burden on us to just keep striving. Then there's the economy. As our piece of the financial pie shrinks, we fight harder for it, pushing our perfectionism into absolute overdrive. Add in social media, creating that horribly demoralizing gap between our messy real lives and everyone else's curated highlight reels, and you have a perfect recipe for psychological exhaustion. You can really see this pressure cooker environment when you look at academic expectations. Back in 1976, only about 50% of high school seniors were expected to earn a college degree. Fast forward to 2008, and that number jumps to 80%. When success at all costs becomes the baseline, people begin to feel that absolute perfection is required just to feel safe, to be socially accepted, and to have any self-worth at all. So, society is aggressively demanding perfection, but here is the undeniable truth. Human beings are not perfect. We are going to fail, which brings us to section 3, the psychology of failure. How do we currently handle the inevitable mistakes that pop up under these impossible modern standards? Well, to answer this, we're shifting our paradigm completely. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is where it comes from. We are leaving clinical psychology behind for a moment. This information actually comes from the Aerospace Corporation, the people who deal with rockets, satellites, and extremely high-stakes systems. We are going to look at human failure through the lens of aerospace engineering, because frankly, nobody studies the root causes of catastrophic failure quite like they do. Aerospace engineers recognize two very different ways to view failure. The old view assumes that a system is basically safe and that failures are just caused by unreliable, erratic humans, the so-called bad apples, who just didn't try hard enough or weren't paying attention. The new view completely flips this on its head. The new view recognizes that failure actually happens when well-meaning people are forced to navigate complex, flawed systems while balancing multiple competing constraints. Just listen to this quote regarding the eternal conflict faced by professional pilots. On one hand, they are told to never, ever compromise safety. But on the other hand, the system whispers, don't cost us time, don't waste our money, get your passengers to their destination, don't find reasons why you can't. And this brilliantly illustrates the trap. Systems force individuals into impossible choices. When an error happens, it's rarely because someone just chose to be reckless. It's because they were trying to reconcile conflicting goals, like speed versus safety, in real time. But why is it so hard for us to see this? Why are we so incredibly quick to blame ourselves or others when things go wrong? That brings us to Section 4, the hindsight bias trap. This is the ultimate cognitive illusion, and I guarantee you are falling into it when you judge your own past mistakes. Hindsight bias basically stands on three pillars. First, it's retrospective. Once we know a bad outcome happened, we look back and invent a neat, linear story, totally ignoring how chaotic the moment actually was. Second, it's counterfactual. We imagine these utopian alternatives, like, oh, I should have just done X, while completely ignoring the actual constraints we had. And yeah, our internal monologues are absurdly good at doing this to us. And third, it's dissociative. It is incredibly easy to look back and cherry-pick the exact piece of data we missed, completely forgetting the chaotic fog of war we were operating in at the time. Let's move to Section 5 and see how this builds into our final concept, building a just culture. Because once you understand that perfectionism is a systemic plague and failure isn't just about bad apples, you need a totally new way to operate.
This is the concept of a just culture. It was first fully articulated by James Reardon in 1997 in his work on managing organizational accidents, and today it's heavily utilized in high-stakes environments like aviation and healthcare. The core philosophy here is that mistakes are generally the product of faulty organizational cultures and systems, rather than solely the fault of a flawed person. In a just culture, the way you react to failure fundamentally changes. The old, toxic way, the way of the perfectionist, is to ask the wrong question. Who caused the problem? Or why am I so stupid? But the right question, the systems engineering question, is entirely different. It asks, what went wrong? It removes the toxic blame and replaces it with sheer productive curiosity. So how do you actually implement this in your daily life, in your workplace, or most importantly, in your own internal monologue? First, stop asking who is responsible and start asking what is responsible. Second, ask the 5 whys from a system perspective. Don't just stop at, I made a typo. Ask why you were rushing, why the deadline was totally unreasonable, and what system constraint forced that error. And third, find the balance. A just culture isn't about avoiding accountability completely. It's about finding the healthy balance between extreme punishment and total blamelessness. Which leaves us with this final, crucial thought to take away. We are living in a society that increasingly demands perfection, driving record levels of anxiety and burnout. But aerospace engineers know a secret. Perfection is a complete myth, and failure is absolutely inevitable. So I leave you with this question. In your own life, when the inevitable mistakes happen, are you wasting your energy brutally punishing the bad apple in the mirror? Or are you going to step back, show yourself some grace, and start engineering a better, more forgiving system? Think about that. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.